Oh, hello there, and welcome to the Tavern. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. And I know what some of you who are long-term fans might be thinking, didn't you do a St. Patrick's Day video before? And the answer is yes, I did. It's 7 minutes long and has a lot of weird edits and some video rendering mistakes. So I decided to do a new version that would pay proper tribute to St. Patrick. The other thing that came to my attention after doing that video was that the dates provided for St. Patrick's life might be off. One of the reasons why the timeline might be off with St. Patrick is because records weren't kept very well. Now, the Roman Empire is known for keeping its records. We know there was a Patrick, we know his cathedral, all that stuff. However, while he was there and while he was alive, the dates at which he was doing things are kind of wibbly wobbly. While St. Patrick did write his own biography, which really helps with a lot of the adventures of his life, what we lack is the concrete dates when things occurred. So I'm going to do my best with explaining the history and ministry of St. Patrick. St. Patrick was a Roman British citizen, so he was living in the British Isles under the rule of Rome. He was supposedly born around 385, and his father was a deacon, and his grandfather was a priest. So Patrick already had an upbringing of Christianity. At the age of 16, his village was attacked, and he was captured by pirates and sold into slavery in Ireland, where he worked as a shepherd for 6 years until he heard the voice of God, who told him that if he headed out to the coast, he would find a boat and his freedom. So, listening to God, St. Patrick made the trek for 200 miles to get to the coast. Upon reaching the coast, he found a boat and persuaded the captain to take him along. It was about a 3-day trip to take him back to Britannia, and from there he had a 28-day walk through the wilderness to find his original home. In the process, he met a lot of different people, told them his story, and tried to convert people when possible. One of the more interesting tales that came out of this is that when he and a handful of people he was traveling with were in desperate need of food, he prayed, and a boar ran up to them and essentially offered itself as food. Boars, especially in Irish tradition, they are very violent and aggressive. So the fact that one would essentially surrender itself as food goes to show how powerful Patrick's prayers actually were. Upon returning to his home, he continued his training and studies to be a proper priest. Around 422 or 423 AD, he made his way back to Ireland and began his ministries. He traveled to a lot of different towns within Ireland. There are many legends and myths that were started because of his travels, and ended up becoming the first bishop of Armagh and the primate of Ireland before his death in 461. However, according to modern scholars, it is more likely he died in 493, which likely means he wasn't even born in 385, but more likely somewhere between 415 and 417 AD, which doesn't make a huge difference in the course of telling the story of his life. This is more about placing him in a slightly later time period, which ties in better with some of his disciples and places him in a position where he wasn't the first missionary to Ireland, but the most successful missionary to Ireland. As I said earlier, his ministry has a lot of different stories that came out of it. And even though he wasn't the first missionary to Ireland, he was definitely one of the most successful. However, it is also believed that some of his ministry is conflated with that of a man named Palladius. Palladius also traveled to Ireland around that time. He had a very vibrant ministry. Unfortunately, unlike Patrick, his achievements aren't quite as grand, but our history books and the general telling of Patrick's story may involve parts of Palladius's adventures. Before we get into some of the more interesting stories, let's cover the most basic one, which is that Patrick drove the snakes out of Ireland. Well, here's the thing about that. When the Roman explorers got to Ireland, they made a full list of the various flora and fauna of the island. And one of the things noted by the Roman explorers was that there are no snakes in Ireland, and they found that very interesting because there's snakes basically everywhere else. Which means prior to Patrick's ministry, the snakes didn't exist. However, it is believed by some people that the story is a way of talking about him driving the pagans out of Ireland, and that the Christians would be safe there and not be attacked or persecuted. This is a more reasonable interpretation because this functions as a simple story you can tell kids, and as an adult you'll better understand the metaphor and the history tied into the story of driving the snakes out of Ireland. The other major myth about St. Patrick is that he used the shamrock, a natural growing clover in Ireland, as a symbol of the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. This could be true. However, there are no writings that say he specifically did this, which means if he did, it was just part of his general preaching and not really kept as a specific key function of converting the Irish. Now, there are some Irish gods who are known to have like a trinity of powers, and to take that trinity of power, change it to a different trinity of power, and explain to the Irish people how God functions. But the bottom line is, we just don't really have any information that says, yes, he specifically did that. So as far as I can tell, this is just folklore that could potentially have been based on an actual sermon given by St. Patrick. One of the major stories told around Ireland is that St. Patrick would travel from town to town with a staff made of ashwood. When he got to a town where he wanted to give ministry, he would take his ashwood staff, jam it into the ground, and begin preaching to the people of that town. Over time, that staff would grow into a full, large ash tree, and upon the completion of his ministry in that area, he would take a branch, break it off, turn it into a new staff, and continue his journey to the next town. This is significant for a lot of reasons. One, ash trees do have a spiritual importance to the ancient Celts, which I'm not really wanting to get into the full Celtic belief system right now. Just know that they are important to the Celtic people. In addition to that, I'm not entirely certain a stick drove into the ground will grow a brand new tree, or if this is supposed to be an act of God. Another story tells that when he was in Ireland, he traveled up a mountain and fasted for 40 days. Very similar to other people in the Bible who took time to fast, usually in the desert or in isolation, to try to better connect themselves with God, going all the way back to, of course, Moses. It is believed that when he was doing this fasting, his prayers and meditations were being interrupted by demon-like birds that would flock around him and harass him. And he took his bell that he would use to gather his flock and ring it, and the sound of the bell was so powerful, it not only drove these demonic birds away, it actually banished them off of Earth so that other Christians would not be harassed by these demonic birds. Now, this story is very much more in line with your traditional saint stories of battling against the devil and his minions, and I like this story. It's relatively simple, and it just shows that Patrick's faith was really strong and that he carried a bell for gathering, obviously, not only the ministries, potentially also a bell he may have used to gather the flock when he was a shepherd. Meaning that his bell was not only used as a shepherd of animals, but also as a shepherd of people. Metaphorically, it works very well. Whether or not it happened is up to your personal beliefs, but it is an interesting story to show that spiritual strength of St. Patrick and his devotion to protecting Ireland from the devil. Last story I'm going to share this time around, because there are a lot, and unfortunately some of the stories were written after his death, and some literally centuries after his death, which means there's a lot of St. Patrick fan fiction out there. Now, I don't want to discount every story written after his death, because some of them may have been based on the accounts of people who knew St. Patrick, or traditional folklore handed down through generations. Thus, the last story I'm going to tell is about Dira. Dira is a chieftain of one of the Irish tribes. When St. Patrick got a vision of where he should build his church, he went to this hill, and the chieftain claimed the hill and said, "No, this is my hill." And while Patrick and his people started to work on the church, he would go and harass them. Oftentimes, his horses would tromp around on the grounds. He would potentially attack or raid, destroy what they'd built. But strangely enough, all of Daira's horses got very, very sick. And then Daira himself ended up contracting a very strange disease that no person in the village could cure. Eventually, the people of the village came to St. Patrick and said, "Please do something for our chieftain. You're a holy man. Save him." And even though Daira had done terrible things and had harassed Patrick and his ministry, St. Patrick knew that he had to do the right thing. So he went to the village, found the chieftain, and blessed him with holy water. In addition to that, he also blessed all of that chieftain's livestock. Within a day, all the livestock were as healthy as can be, and the chieftain himself recovered from his disease. And as a gift to St. Patrick, he not only offered him the hill to build his church upon, but he also promised to not harm Patrick or any of his parishioners ever again. This is a simple story, and whether or not it's true, it feels more grounded than many of the stories of Patrick meeting various Irish deities or having strange magical objects he carried with him. This is more the point of he was being harassed by the locals, bad things happened to them, the good Christians saved the day, and now everyone's happy. Again, a very common kind of story you'll hear of the saints, and it works really well to kind of show the good person Patrick is and how he's being a proper Christian, not holding grudges, and helping those who believe as well as those who do not believe. So, St. Patrick was consecrated as a saint in the 7th century, a couple hundred years after he died, and his feasts would start being practiced around that time in Ireland. However, obviously we're practicing St. Patrick's Day here in America, we practice it all over the world. How did St. Patrick's Day go from a small tradition on an island, which was more of a religious holiday? It was very much a go to church, pray, reflect on what Patrick had achieved, and how you can be a better Catholic, and became something that was more about big feasts and lavish parades and, unfortunately, drunken debauchery, which ties a little too close to Irish stereotypes. But what are you gonna do? Now, the Irish themselves did swap the feast day to be more celebratory around the 9th or 10th century. In the more modern time period, the Lenten traditions of fasting and no meat and things like that are lifted on his saint day for the Irish. St. Patrick's Day has a long tradition in the United States. How long? It goes back to 1601 to St. Augustine, a Spanish colony in what we now know as Florida, where a group of workers threw a St. Patrick's Day celebration to continue their heritage in the New World. The first big St. Patrick's Day parade occurred in New York in 1772, where a group of Irish soldiers who were homesick threw the parade and marched it down the streets to the cheers of various Irish immigrants. However, it wouldn't be until 1848 when the various Irish societies of New York would gather together to make the official St. Patrick's Day parade for New York. Overall, the idea of St. Patrick's Day has made its way across the country. People of all walks of life get together and have a good time, whether they are drinking beer and eating traditional Irish food, if they are going out and praying and trying to connect with their spirituality, or if they're just wearing green and having a silly time. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it's enlightened you onto how important St. Patrick is and how amazing his legends really are. If you want to hear more about any of the saints, let me know in the comments below. I'll try to team it up with their feast day if at all possible. Until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you at the tavern.